Welcome back, everyone. It is now time for our last CXO mega panel discussion for the day, and I'm sure this will be as insightful as the ones you've experienced all through the day today. The topic for this one is Thrive, Not Survive, Defining a Different Normal. So while 2020 and 2021 were about surviving through the multiple disruptions caused by the pandemic, 2022 is going to be all about thriving and moving up to the next level of business transformation. In these past few months, transformation leaders went from rethinking their structures, capabilities, and processes to developing a readiness culture for change, along with ideas on innovation and leading transformation in the new hybrid environment. What made a recovery for business leaders possible in this context was the combination of process, technology, and people. With survival becoming a concept of the past, how can CXOs accelerate their business growth and lead their organizations to thrive? And in today's panel discussion, this is exactly what we'll be discussing. The key takeaways for you would be, what are some of the structural design changes that organizations need to do to define a different normal for their businesses? How can organizations become more agile to succeed in today's competitive world? And how can technology play a critical role in accelerating business growth? And I'm delighted to invite our esteemed panelists for this session today. First up, we have with us Alex Badenoch, Group Executive, Transformation, Communications and People, Telstra. Alex became Telstra's Group Executive, Transformation and People leader on 1st October 2018, and in February 2020 took on expanded accountability for the communications team, becoming Group Executive, Transformation, Communications and People. In this role, Alex is accountable for Telstra's transformation roadmap and orchestrating the delivery of its key priorities with a focus on transforming the way employees work. The role also oversees activity designed to strengthen employee engagement and external reputation. Our next speaker for today is Dr. Francisco Castillo, SVP and CIO, Maynilad Water Services. Dr. Francisco Castillo is currently Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer of Maynilad Water Services, Inc., the water concessionaire for the west area of Manila's greater metropolitan area, which serves over 9 million people. In 2013, he was named Outstanding ASEAN CIO by IDG, and in 2016 was voted Best ASEAN CIO during the ASEAN IT Strategy Forum in Singapore. He has also recently been named among the top 10 ASEAN CIOs by IDG in 2021. Next up, we have Evangeline Chua, Chief People Officer, GovTech Singapore. Evangeline's key drivers are people, passion, and performance by investing in people to grow and drive results collectively. In her former role, Evangeline was the Managing Director of Organization and People for Temasek International, responsible for the full spectrum of HR practices across 9 cities. And prior to joining Temasek, Evangeline was with Citi Singapore for a total of 12 years. As the head of human resources for Singapore, Evangeline brings great passion and breadth of experience to the role. She is responsible for the design of human resource practices to effectively support the organization's strategy with the vision to implement best HR practices to attract, engage, and motivate. And last but not the least, this panel discussion will be moderated by Jaime Ruiz-Cabrero, Managing Director and Senior Partner, BCG. Jaime is an experienced leader in energy with extensive experience in transformation and operational excellence programs, corporate and business unit strategy development, business plan development, internationalization, growth plans, development of new business, corporate development, equity stories, business plan analysis, target screening, valuation, regulatory analysis, and strategy. So thank you so much for joining us today, Alex, Francisco, Evangeline, and Jaime. I'm sure our audience are looking forward to some incredible insights from you all. So without any further delay, let me hand over the frame to Jaime to start this exciting discussion. Over to you, Jaime.
Okay, thank you very much, Jasmine. And it's my great honor to moderate this amazing panel with such a great guests and panelists, Francisco, Evangeline, and Alex. So I would like to start by asking a couple of questions to the full panel and get the reviews from all of you on those same questions. And then maybe after that, we can go to some specific questions to some of you. So the first question I would like to ask is, if we look at the world now, many of the corporations and organizations really are going from a situation of really surviving, right, to actually thriving and growing, right? So many organizations have gone from a recovery from a very difficult and a strong calamity to really looking at the future in a different light, right? So what are the challenges that we still face, but also the opportunities that we can capture. And what are those that you see in your context that we should look at, and that would open up for different organizations to actually grow from today, right? So perhaps going to start with you, Francisco. What will be your view on this? And then we can then follow up with Alex and Evangeline.
Okay, well, that's an interesting question. I think, and as we've seen in many newspapers, articles, and so forth, that we are never going to go back to what the world was previously, especially in the way we work. I guess the most obvious impact has been this work from home. I don't think we'll ever return to fully, working from the office. Today, I'm actually, having this call from my house. But beyond that, I think it has had an impact in many other ways. I'll just give an example. In Maynilad, as a water utility, the Philippines has always been very conservative in terms of adoption of new technologies. For example, in payments. So typically people would pay cash over the counter. About 80% of our transactions were over the counter. And there's been a digital push, to change that habit, and without success. And suddenly overnight, that just happened, right? I mean, now people order food, people do all sorts of transactions from their home, and it's just accelerated, the digitalization of payments incredibly. So that's just one of the examples, and I'm sure the other panel members have other ideas and examples as well.
Thank you so much, Francisco. And indeed, we're definitely working now in a very different way than what we used to, and now we're taking this for granted. So, Alex, what will be your view on the opportunities that we have ahead of us?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and I'm sure that you'll hear similar themes from most of us. It actually, what's been interesting about the last couple of years is I think it's brought the world together on some of the themes of workplace and workplace change, where we're all having to deal with a common challenge and a common opportunity. And there are three key things that really stand out for me, and one Francisco has just touched on, which is the adoption of technology and the innovation of technology. If I look at our customer base, we saw more progress on online transactions in the last 2 years than we saw in the preceding 10. And it wasn't actually that the technology changed, but necessity brought about a change in behaviour. And we've seen exactly the same in workplaces. While absolutely we're seeing an acceleration of technology innovation, the biggest change we're seeing is that adoption of technology. Is we used to sort of say, oh, well, we can't do it because the technology is not good enough. Well, it's amazing how overnight most of us suddenly could do things we said the day before we couldn't do, which said that the greatest barrier to adoption was the human, not the technology. So that's the first great opportunity for us to continue to build on. The second, again, Francisco touched on, it's flexibility. And I suppose for us at Telstra, we talk very much about hybrid, which is we believe there's a place for office, we believe there is a place for home. But what we have seen over the last 2 years is a fundamental shift in acceptance of enabling true choice and flexibility. And I think that is the number one issue for companies to thrive and to attract and retain the right talent. They're going to have to embrace flexibility. Otherwise, people will choose to join companies that do. So I think flexibility. And last but not least, I think one of the best things about the last 2 years, and one of the things that every single employer needs to be focused on, is truly embracing humanity in the workplace. We have seen a world where suddenly our lives, our personal lives, our families, our children, our pets have all come into the workplace because we're all dialing in from home, which made us stop and reflect that a human being isn't just the person who shows up at work. A human being is the thing that comes with everything that comes with them. And it means you have good days, you have bad days, you have challenging days, you have fabulous days. But as leaders, we actually need to truly understand the whole human being to get the very best out of our people and to drive absolute peak performance. So humanity, flexibility, and technology.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I could not agree more with those three topics. Indeed, many times we forget that technology, many times the challenge is not technology itself. It's really the behavioral change that comes with it, right? So I think you hit it very well in your description, Alex. Good, Evangeline. It would be great to hear your thoughts on that same question.
Thanks, Jaime. Yes, I fully agree with what Alex has said. I feel that pandemic has actually helped us realize the gains of productivity, right? Due to the force of pandemic, and hence it enables empowerment of the talent. Company can now assess talent and embrace talent on their own terms, and it's going to be the case, right? Given that there's great vaccination and every single company is trying to retain their employees as long as possible, prolong their employment and so forth, right? But it is really the employees market at this moment, right? And hence the power of center, era is going to be soon over. In the past, we used to say, if you want a job, you have to come to KL, you have to come to Philippines, for certain company shared services and whatever, right? But the power of era has been disrupted, right? And soon enough, we all can work remotely anywhere, for the company. And I would say that the best talent actually, they don't have to conform and they don't have to work, based on company's terms now. So that is something, a very, very fundamental shift from an organization perspective, whereby I think Alex did mention an organization has to be flexible, and the company has to evolve their policies so that based on the new economy, they can arbitrage the talent with economic value. So that's something that an organization has to look further and make sure that they cope with all these changes in time to come.
Very good. Thank you, Evangeline. And indeed, when I talk to some of our clients and partners, the issue around people and retention and hiring, it's definitely top of mind, right? The market has changed dramatically. That is an absolute reality. And I think all of us in this panel are facing this one way or the other. So one other question I would have for all of you, and this time perhaps I will start with you, Evangeline. The reality is the world will continue to be very uncertain. I mean, and we're seeing this as we start the year with Omicron. Many of the plans were shelved, but then the thing wasn't as bad as it looked, in many areas, because the impact was milder, but yet everything changed very quickly, right? One way and then the other. So how can, what will be the strategies for companies to continue to thrive in this evolving world, in this ever-changing world? How do you keep innovation and change, happening continuously in the company? Evangeline, what will your view on this one?
Yeah. To Alex's earlier point, I think speed and agility, is definitely very, very key for us to be able to cope with the lightning changes, right, that is coming our way. We literally, even from a HR perspective, in the past 2 years, HR has been so agile that we keep evolving our policies to cope with, all these changes. And coupled with a very sound vision, to direct the organization. Because essentially, we are working in a very dispersed workforce, right? All our workforce are working from home and whatever, right? And the dispersed workforce has to really connect with the company's vision, and the direction. And the strategy must be very, very clear. And this, to me, would be some of the key success factors to thrive in the current environment for an organization. And the purpose of the workforce the workforce has to resonate very, very well with the purpose of the organization in order for them to propel their passion, and engagement with the organization. So to me, speed and agility is absolutely key, coupled with a very, very clear vision.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Evangeline. And I think I completely agree as well. And I think that, when we talk also about the challenge on people and recruiting and hiring, I think purpose is probably one of the best ways to really keep our teams engaged, right, and affiliated. So it really resonates well. Alex, we'd love to hear your thoughts as well on this one question.
Yeah, so again, look, you'll get similar themes as Evangeline just went through. I think the three call-outs that I would make are absolutely clarity of strategy and purpose. You have to know, and all of your people have to know why they're there, why they want to be there, and what purpose, what role they play in delivering on our strategy. So that's something we've certainly, I think, built a muscle around over the last couple of years, is the simplicity and clarity of strategy really, really matters. It's particularly in a remote working environment. More than ever, I think then the second thing is an organisation's values. I think what has been really, really strong over the last couple of years is companies that have weathered this storm well and have retained their workforce's choice became available again are those with really strong values, so that people again people don't want just a job. They actually want to have a greater sense of purpose and connection in life. And I think, the last couple of years have made that need even more profound than it was before. So being really clear on your values and what you stand for, and really showing people that your values guide your decisions. They're not a poster on a wall. They are lived and breathed every single day in your organisation and the choices that you make. And last but not least, and Evangeline mentioned it, agility. The ability to repoint and refocus your workforce on different priorities really in a very nimble way becomes very critical. I think most of us have seen, and you just mentioned, we didn't exactly start 2022, certainly in Australia, exactly how we had hoped. I think we were thinking a little bit more certainty, a little less disruption, and we are seeing our world massively disrupted. It's not the same disruption as we had in 2021 and 2020, but we are potentially seeing our businesses more impacted in some ways than we have through all of the rest of the pandemic. So our ability to reprioritise, realign, refocus, and do that very, very nimbly is more important than it ever was. And then you become less concerned about uncertainty or change, because it becomes part of your DNA to respond to that. And I think those are the key things: clarity of strategy, very, very clear and lived values, and the ability to be agile and nimble.
Very good. No, thank you so much, Alex.
Jaime, if I may just add on
Sure,
to what Alex has mentioned, right? Let's not kid ourselves. It's not the CXO that will make it happen. Neither is it just HR's effort, right? It literally takes a whole village to raise the child. So the collaboration, in a situation such as like pandemic, it really calls for the whole organization to pull all the efforts together and be totally aligned. Yeah.
Indeed. Thank you for that, Evangeline. And one thing I'd like to also call out, I think I really like the point on the values, right? And how people really now are more and more aligned or want to be aligned with the values of the company they work for, right? And you can see this in our case in BCG, our fastest growing practice area now is social impact. You could see, and when you interview people, the first thing they ask you is, okay, for whom we would never work? What are the no-fly zones, right? People want to make sure that they work for the company they're proud of. So it really resonates on that particular point also, Alex. Okay, Francisco, I think we heard a lot of very good points. I'm sure that many of them you will have coincidence, but we'd love also to hear your thoughts and your on how you look at this question.
Yeah, maybe not to repeat what the other speaker said, because I totally agree. But agility, innovation, nowadays they're buzzwords. They're very much abused, right? But there is a need for that, right? And I think it doesn't happen overnight. The framework has to be there. The framework really is, as the others said, strategy, it's collaboration. That has to be in place so that when things change, you're ready. Right? Now, from a technology point of view, which is my area, what has this meant for us? So I think that as a CIO, as a technologies or handling the technology department, we actually are the enablers for this to happen in a more nimble way. We're not the ones pushing it. What the push is really coming from the necessity. And I'll give another few examples of what I mean. We've had what we call an online bill system for our customers, wherein they can see the bill, and that before the pandemic was really it was utilized, but sparingly. And then suddenly, the lockdown came and the traffic just multiplied times 12, right? So that poses challenges for us because we have to keep the thing up and running, as an example. Or another example, during the lockdown, we were not able to send the bills and read the meters. And then suddenly, after the lockdown, all the bills came in and people rushed to our offices to pay or to clarify some of the billing concerns that they have. And so that was an unsafe situation because you have all these people rushing into the offices, right? So again, it's not us as technologists that did this, but we had the tools, and the branches themselves came up with a very innovative way to address this. They came up with QR codes wherein the customer would just scan it, and then he would type in his concern, and automatically it will go into our internal workflow system, right? And that avoided really the agglomeration of people which in the offices which posed a health risk, right? So again, that's only possible if you have the framework from a technology point of view, if you have the right tools in place. But it's really the business people down the line that are the ones that really know what is needed to address their concerns, right? And so agreeing again with what Evangeline and Alex said, you have to have that culture of openness, of being able to hear what your own employees want and their suggestions, and being able to do that in a very nimble way. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Francisco. And once again, the topic of people-centric discussions and decisions, beyond technology, right? Having said this, Alex, one question for you. So we've mentioned a lot about how behaviors and people-centric mindset is key, right? But the truth is also we've seen a lot of new technologies being deployed and developed. Things like AI, for instance, that is here today and wasn't as developed, or machine learning. People call it different ways. Wasn't nearly as developed, 5 years ago as it is today. But also what we've seen is a lot of changes in the consumer sentiment, how consumers, what are their priorities, how they think about the world, what they want from their service providers, right? So I'd be curious to see your views. Obviously, in your company is very much around technology as well and around people, right? Deal with your consumers. What are those trends, around technology and consumer sentiment that you believe are important in today's world and we should be tracking and thinking about?
Yeah, good question. I think there's sort of two dimensions that I would point out is I mentioned before, the adoption of online sort of transactions and relationships has shifted dramatically, but also the expectation of the quality of that experience has changed dramatically, and people no longer differentiate what they expect from their electricity provider or their telecommunications company from what they would expect from a Google or a sort of high-tech kind of company. They expect the same simplicity, the same quality, the same responsiveness from all of their providers. So I think it actually has put a lot of pressure on companies to accelerate, and I'm sure Francisco can talk about this from his job, to accelerate their technology development, their online development, their ability to provide a very seamless customer experience. It's introducing very new jobs and new volumes of jobs. So, for example, once upon a time in our world, the largest number of customer transactions were over a telephone. You ring me if you want to fix something. Now you've seen huge numbers shift to online, but also to asynchronous messaging. So different ways of transacting and different customer expectations are evolving. So I think what it does is it says to companies, you've always got to be looking forward and you've got to be pushing to what's the next way that you want a simple, seamless, easy transaction with your customer. So on one hand, big shift on technology. The other thing that I think many organisations have probably accelerated their realisation on over the last couple of years is not technology related, or not necessarily technology related, and I think it's around corporate social responsibility and the need to be thinking of everything from your impact on climate and your own emissions, and really having a clear plan to contribution, but also more broadly, how are you participating in the communities that you live in? Certainly here, and I'm sure right across the globe, when the pandemic hit, making sure that we thought about our company and the role that we played, whether that was giving people relief from paying their bills who were losing jobs initially in the pandemic, whether it was using our technology to help kids be able to get access to online schooling, because not every child has access to the technology or the connection that they need. So how we showed up and the choices we made as a business in terms of, and it's kind of goes back to that values point, right? Which is, do you actually live up to them when the moment comes, or do you just talk about them? So I think corporate social responsibility combined with this huge acceleration on technology are the two things that I would touch on. Okay,
thank you so much, Alex, and also beyond values and social impact that you mentioned, right? I hear things around simplicity, around seamless. I think expectations, you also use the word expectations, right? As I heard once, happiness is the difference between expectations and reality, right? So if the expectations change, right, even if reality doesn't change, your level of happiness would also change. So it definitely resonates. So thank you for that, Alex. Francisco, one question for you as a CIO, right? So perhaps I'm going to take us back a couple of years when the pandemic started and everything changed and we all had to move very quickly to a hybrid mode and a remote way of working, right? So what challenges did you have back then, and how do you deal with it? Because I think now we're all getting more or less used to it, but how do you experience that challenge and this very sudden shift from a CIO perspective?
Yeah, well, I think what I'll say probably resonates with the other speakers and even the audience. But overnight, we had to, deploy for over 2,000 of our employees the ability to work from home, right? So and we had to do it in just 3 days, so to speak. And not only that, but doing it in a secure way. That's really the challenge, right? Because the worst thing that can happen is, you have a grave incident, security incident when this is done. So we had to put in all the tools. We actually didn't even have enough laptops for everyone. So, and then there was the logistics problem because suddenly everybody ordered laptops. So we actually even allowed people to take their desktop home, right? Just to be able to connect via a secure way. And so that's one, right? And I'm sure that that sounds very familiar. The other aspect, which is probably particular to some industries, is aside from the IT, I'm also in charge of the OT. So we have actually more than 200 plants all over our concession area. That's water treatment plants, sewage treatment plants, pumping stations, and again. The idea was minimizing the agglomeration of people at the plants. And you can only do that so much. So some of our plants are fully automated, but not all. So some of the larger plants actually need physical presence there. But the challenge for my team was whenever there's an incident at the plant, what do you do? So again, we had this already in place, but it just really got accelerated. We enabled the ability for my team to actually go into the plant remotely and do the troubleshooting and analysis without having to go physically there. Of course, if it turns out that there's some equipment that needs to replace, then you don't have any choice. But that the amount of time that you spend in the plant was reduced dramatically, maybe around 80%, right? Because all you have, when you go to the plant now, you need to replace this. You bring it, you replace it, you test it, and that's it, right? So that was really a good exercise, so to speak. The other aspect related also to the plants is, and again, this got accelerated, is the concept of having a digital twin, wherein you have a mimic of the plant and you actually emulate the functions of the plant without the physical plant being connected. And again, that eliminates maybe even 99% of the bugs, so that when you go to the plant and you put in the automation system, it's just fine-tuning. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much, Francisco. And I think you also bring a new dimension to the discussion today, right? So we earlier talked about adoption as a key part of technology. It's not just technology, it's also the adoption, but also bring a very interesting thing, which is ingenuity, how the human mind is capable of doing different things with the same tools they had before, and now really changing and bringing things to the next level, right? So I think you brought up a number of very good examples, right, on how quickly you manage to adapt, right? And again, the human ingenuity is always there. Will never stop surprising us. Evangeline, one question for you, and obviously you work for a government agency, right? So you have also a different perspective of the world, right? So in your mind, what could be the measures that the public sector can launch, right, to help companies emerge stronger from the pandemic, right? But also conversely, what should the private sector do to really make sure that nobody's left behind, and that we help all of the people in the areas where we operate actually emerge also stronger from the pandemic? We'd love to hear your views on this.
Yeah, whether with or without the pandemic, I think the purpose of the government really is to help to boost the economy, right? And hence, naturally, the partnership between the public and the private partnership has to be very, very strong. It is very, very collaborative. And in fact, even if I just look at GovTech, we do collaborate with the whole ecosystem, to leverage on our strategic vendors and all that to help us to deliver on our projects. And to, in fact, it's so consultative that we even have like tech car keys, that what we call, right? We even engage our citizens to give us their perspective from a user-centric perspective, right? On how, when we create a product or when we create a system, what do they look for? What are the UI, UX that they're expecting from the government and all that? So to me, it's a whole ecosystem that we are working with. And, and another product that I can kind of think of on top of my mind is really the SingPass. I mean, Jaime, you probably are aware of this, the SingPass and MyInfo, right? And we are collaborating very closely with the financial industry and many organizations, whereby once the citizen gives the approval to the banks to draw the data from MyInfo, I literally don't have to fill in any data, right? They draw directly from the data bank from the government. And so, it really saves, it really accelerates, a lot of growth, and it has productivity gains from the government perspective and from the commercial organizations perspective. So these are some of the examples whereby, with or without pandemic, collaboration is there, and it's very, very strong. Because from a government's perspective, we want the commercial organizations to succeed in Singapore.
Very good. Thank you so much, Evangeline. And indeed, I'm very familiar with SingPass. It's quite amazing. I remember when I had to sell my car, and I just did a click, and that's it. I could not believe it. It was a really amazing experience. Very good. Well, thank you so much, all of the panelists. I think it's been a fantastic discussion. I believe we're coming to the end of the session. But perhaps before we close, it would be great to hear maybe your thoughts on some of the takeaways that you got from the session. I will start by sharing some of mine, perhaps while you kind of process and think about what would be your key takeaways. But clearly for me, even though a lot of it was around technology from the outset, right? It was very striking to hear how all the panelists talked about, purpose and humanity and values and social impact and behaviors, right? It really is, despite this highly technological world that we're experiencing and enjoying, frankly, still the things will be and remain very human-centric. So that would be for me one of the key takeaways. So I don't know who wants to continue. Maybe you, Alex. You want to go next?
So look, I'm happy to. I agree with yours. I think in a way the last couple of years and what I listened to today just tells me that we've learned something really good from the last couple of years. As much as there's been challenges and obviously really difficult times, there's a lot of silver lining because I think it has reminded us about things like the humanity in workplace, about the importance of what you stand for and your values, having clarity of purpose and having sort of the nimble and agile response to what your customers need or want in any given time. So, yeah, it's easy to look at the downside, but when I listen to this panel, actually what I take away is we've learnt lots of good things, we've made lots of positive changes, and the companies that are successful going forward and who are going to thrive are the ones that build on those changes, that embrace those changes and actually keep accelerating them rather than trying to find a way back to where we were before.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Maybe let me just go for it, right? I think when we talk about agility, in a startup environment, it is certainly possible to be nimble, agile, and adaptable, right? However, in a bigger organization, right, that has like Telstra, for example, that has been in existence for years, right? I would say that, even if I look at GovTech, for example, what really inhibits agility is the hierarchy, bureaucracy, and silo mentality. Human beings are agile by nature. You put them into crisis, it's survival mode, and they are all agile by nature. And so as we enter the age of agility, I think what we have to be mindful is there is certainly a potential downside to agility. Because when sometimes people say, oh, we're agile, it could also mean that we don't plan. It's like we go for it. Right? It's like snap a finger and then we just go for it. And then before you know it, when you look back on hindsight, you say, we should not have taken that. So I think, being agile and still requires proper planning in that sense. And I think one thing that I want to end off with is, given that I'm from HR and with the great resignation, everybody is throwing money at employees to invite them to join us. I would want to say that money cannot buy love for the company. It must be the purpose. It must be the values, like what Alex has mentioned. Yeah.
Indeed. Thank you, Evangeline. Okay, Francisco, I think you're the last.
Yeah, well, I'm the last. So let me give, again, a technology perspective to this, right? We talk about resiliency, agility, right? And all that. And my answer actually might be a bit surprising being a technology person. But first is, my advice to people in technology is do not look at the technology itself. I mean, don't fall in love with just the technology. You have to look at the needs. Start from there, because otherwise you'll have a mismatch. No matter how beautiful the technology, if it's not something that is really useful for the organization, it's pretty useless. The second thing that I would say is that be aware and understand technology beyond the hype. There's a lot of hype. It's being promulgated by the vendors, unfortunately. But you got to look at really the fundamentals of what is needed. And actually, as a CIO, my biggest job is translating requirements from the business into technology specs, right? And then driving that through. And that brings me to the third point. And I hope you don't mind. I'm going to do a fearless plug-in because I'm the author of the book. So let me just share that. Oops, it's upside down. But it's called Managing Information Technologies, published by Springer in Germany, also available on Amazon. But my third point is you need to be able to have the mechanisms, and I'm talking about processes, to drive the change or drive the projects, right? Drive the portfolio of what you want to do, as well as operations. Because if you talk all about nice ideas, but you don't have the ability to execute, it's also pretty useless. So I'll end it with that. And thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you very much, Francisco. Thank you very much, Evangeline and Alex. Indeed, an example of technology and how things have changed. We have an amazing panel, great insights. I learned a lot. And we have people from, now in Manila, in Singapore, in Australia, and of course the introduction was made from India. So quite amazing and how technology can actually bring us together. So thank you so much. I hope you have a nice rest of the day. Really appreciate your insights.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. A very big thank you to our panelists. It was such an engaging discussion. There was so much to learn from you. And Jaime, it was moderated really, really well. So thank you once again, everyone. That concludes the session for today. Thank you for joining us. Do keep sharing your thoughts and comments in the comments section and on social media. We have some exciting prizes lined up for you. And coming up next is our closing keynote for today on the topic, Stepping into the Future with Purpose and Resilience by Dr. Vinod Shekhar, Chairman and Chief Executive of Petra Group. I'm sure you would not want to miss this. So see you all there. And thank you once again.